Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. We got a lot of things to break down today. We've got the Boston Celtics connected to two, not one, but two NBA superstars, some minor moves around the league as well, and some potential rule changes for next season to dive into. Keith, season's just a few weeks away. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, 2 weeks from tomorrow. We're recording this on Monday the 13th. 2 weeks from tomorrow, training camp's open. So can't wait. We're almost there. I know I got a lot of flack this past week. People were like, it's week one of the NFL season, enough with the basketball. And I was like, look whose feed you're on, man. Like, what are you
Come
what are you
on.
doing? You know, that's what you're gonna get here. I like football too, but basketball is what pays the bills. So you're gonna get some basketball analysis going on here. Plus, I love it, man. I can't wait for it to come back. So I enjoyed the NFL this weekend. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed college football a lot more until BC's quarterback broke his hand and looks like he's going to miss the entire year. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but we'll see. But we'll soldier on. We'll get into the hoop stuff. Yeah, and Celtics story coming out. Gary Washburn of the Boston Globe. He's attached to the Celtics as a beat writer and also a national guy. He's not really a beat writer anymore. He's more of a national guy, but he is Boston based. Says that Boston is going to look at going after Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine this offseason. No real surprises there, right? We kind of, Bradley Beal especially, not a surprise with the friendship with Jason Tatum and all that stuff. But it's going to have to be a sign and trade because the Celtics are not going to have cap space. So they're going to have to sign and trade for either one of those guys. And they're both at the position in their careers where, yeah, they'd give up some money, but I think if they felt like that was a better chance at a championship winning, that the money they would sacrifice, it's not going to be so much to make that huge of a difference.
And we talked about this when the Celtics made all of their signings this offseason. A lot of people were freaking out saying, oh, but what about Bradley Beal? But what about,
Yeah.
pursuing a star? What about needing cap room for all of that? You're just going to take a different path to get there. If Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine says, you know what, I want to be a Boston Celtic, they will figure out a way to make that work. And we'll talk about a sign and trade, of course, and they'll put together a few of the different pieces that they've added this offseason, and they'll ship them out, and they'll get one of these guys in return. There, or sometimes it ends up being a 3-team deal, 4-team deal, whatever. The bottom line is that if they get one of those guys to say yes, they will make it work. They don't have to have that cap room sitting there open. They can make moves in order to facilitate a trade and a sign and trade situation. So, is there one of these guys that you think is more likely than the other to want out of Chicago and Washington, respectively?
Yeah, it's difficult because Chicago clearly put together a team that they expect to be much, much better this season with Lonzo Ball and DeMar
Mm-hmm.
DeRozan, full year, Nikola Vucevic, Alex Caruso coming off the bench, a couple of their other moves that they made. So they're clearly expecting to be a playoff team this year, and that could be enough to convince Levine to stick around. I think a couple of the deals that they made gave them a little bit of cover and protection in case Levine
Mm-hmm.
wants to go elsewhere. I think DeRozan and signing both Ball and Caruso when you already had Levine, I think that gives you a little bit of protection if Levine wants to go elsewhere, plus whatever you would return from Boston or any other team if it was a sign and trade. So we'll see. And then Beal, that one's just so hard because he continually says he doesn't want to be anywhere
Yeah.
else. He wants to win in Washington. That's where he wants to be. Now, I always hold to, I believe guys until they say something differently. And a lot of times they say something differently. There's really no other way to put it other than that. I think from the Celtics side of this is a smarter path forward to have guys already signed and under contract
Mm-hmm.
that you could start to stack the salaries together to go get these guys, because the base of any trade was always going to be draft picks and young players, but those young players and the draft picks, they don't come with the money attached to be able to build up the salaries to
Right.
get to matching, well upwards of $30 million. So what you needed to do was have salaries that you could put together. And now with Josh Richardson, Al Horford's contract, even if it is still only at the 14 million amount, it would count for in a trade. Robert Williams, and then start putting the young guys in there. Romeo Langford, Aaron Nesmith, a whole bunch of draft picks, and you could see how they could get there a lot quicker and easier than if they were chasing after these cap space dreams of wiping out the whole roster except for Tatum and Brown, and that wasn't ever a really overly realistic path. So yeah, well, we'll see, but my guess is neither Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal's playing for the Celtics next year or probably anytime in the future.
Well, and here's the other thing with that, right? Like hoarding cap space on paper, right? You've got some appeal there because you say, "Oh, look at
Sure.
all the room they've got, and they can do some amazing things with it and everything." But there have been a lot of teams that have gone down the path to ruin by hoarding cap space and not spending money, thinking, "Hey, a year from
Yep.
now, this guy's going to be out there, and we're definitely getting that guy." Kevin Durant is
Yeah.
definitely going to be a New York Knick, right? Like
Yeah.
that can be a problem, especially when you're a Celtics team right now. You already have Jason Tatum, you've already got Jaylen Brown, you've got some guys that want to go out there and compete. They don't want to sit there and say, "Hey, the teammate next to me is cap space," right? This is
Yeah.
a teammate to be named later next year. That's not the message that you
Yep.
want to send to those guys. So instead, you spend some money on Robert Williams, you give more money to Marcus Smart and to players like that, and then you've got the salaries to stack up in a sign and trade situation rather than just pushing all your eggs into that basket of, "Hey, this player is going to be on the free agent market," because you don't know that they're going to. They might re-sign, and if they do, then you're kind of stuck. Whereas going the path the Celtics have gone now, worst case, they don't get Beal, they don't get Zach LaVine. Okay, they still have pieces to continue playing winning basketball.
Yeah, and two other things for Beal and Levine.
Mm-hmm.
Beal still very much could sign an extension because he'd be signing an extension off the big contract he has now. The money would be based off of that. That's how he would add years to his contract, and off he goes. That one is far more likely than Levine, who Levine only makes 19.5 million. Get it, only is relative term here.
Right.
I'll take 19.5 dollars if anybody wants to send it my way. But yeah, 19 and a half
Hit that
million.
subscribe button, everybody.
Yeah, please do. School is expensive, as is soccer equipment. But it is he's not going to sign an extension because it's not going to add enough money. So he's going to be a free agent this offseason, barring some major unexpected salary dumps and other things that the Bulls could do. Not going to happen. He's going to hit free agency, where let's see what happens with Beal. But if Levine hits, clearly he's going to be the best free agent on the board this summer, because we thought this past year's free agent class was weak. This one's pretty bad, especially if restricted free agents keep coming off the board. It's not going to be good as far as high end talent. There's a lot of good role players out there, a lot of guys who will make differences and help teams out. But high end talent, the cupboard is pretty bare, and that's just a fact of guys reaching extensions over the last couple of years. A couple more guys are probably going to do that. Some of the guys coming off the rookie scale, so guys like DeAndre Ayton, still out there, Mikal Bridges, Michael Porter Jr., those kind of guys, they're probably going to come to extension agreements. We already saw Trae Young and Luka Doncic taken off the board. So yeah, it's not going to be a very, very good free agent class. So that's where, on the flip side too, if you're Boston, you're feeling all right if Zach LaVine or Beal comes out, because even the teams that are expected to have cap space, there's only going to be a few of them, and they're pretty bad. So you're feeling pretty good about, I think, your opportunities to say, all right, hey, if these guys want to move, sign and trade's going to be the way it's going to happen. And Washington, we can overwhelm them with a package of picks, young players, and a couple win now guys, because likely Washington or even Chicago, with the way they've both spent money over the past few years, neither one of them is going to be looking too much like, all right, let's tear it down and rebuild. Let's try to get what we can in here and try to keep these teams at least competitive, especially on the Chicago side.
Absolutely. So this will be something to keep an eye on as the season progresses. We'll see how happy are Zach LaVine and Bradley Beal. It's going to be a talking point for a while, unless, of course, Bradley Beal signs an extension when he can at the beginning of October or something like that happens. But it's something to keep an eye on, and the Celtics will be one of many teams that will be interested in making a move for these guys if they indeed become available next off season. A few minor moves. Let's get into the minor moves first. Then we'll talk about some of the kind of weirdness going on with a couple of guys here. Jared Vanderbilt, Jordan McLaughlin signing with the Wolves, back to the Wolves on 3-year deals. We've got Isaiah Hart.
On those ones, I just want to hit one thing on those ones too, because I'm going to guess a lot of people, unless they were Wolves fans, haven't been watching, especially late in the last couple years. Jared Vanderbilt last year played pretty good for
Hmm.
Minnesota. Actually looks like a legitimate NBA player. He can really rebound the ball. He's one of the better defensive options, and that's not saying too much. That'd be like saying, Trevor, you're the skinny guy on this show, because that's not saying much for you, considering who you do the show
Jesus.
with. But it's with Vanderbilt, it's good for him, right? It's this is great, a 3-year deal worth about 14 million. I know some people were coming like, that much money for this guy, and that just tells me people have been a little bit out on the Wolves, which I can't really blame
Hmm.
them for. He's going to compete with Jaden McDaniels and Torian Prince, probably for that starting spot next to Karl Anthony Towns, as the Wolves look at. And then Jordan McLaughlin's a guy who played himself off really did a G League year first, then 2 years on two-way contracts with Minnesota, and now lands a 3-year deal. So that's a two-way success story
Hmm.
for him, that he's played himself off that two-way. He's got the potential to be a legitimate backup point guard in the league, and we'll see what happens with him, because right now you've got D'Angelo Russell and Patrick Beverly. Neither one of those guys has been the epitome of good health in the last few years. So Jordan
Hmm.
McLaughlin might be a guy who still sees pretty good minutes. So I like those deals for Minnesota on both of those young players, and retaining a couple of their own. And for them, they were restricted free agents whose markets had all but dried up. So good opportunity for them to get in there on deals that weren't just signing the qualifying offer.
Right, right. So that makes sense from for all parties involved there. Isaiah Hartenstein, who's a big
Yeah.
that we've been keeping a bit of an eye on, did get a training camp deal with the Clippers. The Clippers, right now they've got a question mark with Serge Ibaka. Is he going to be ready for the season? What's that going to look
Yep.
like? How much is he really going to play? So perhaps some opportunity there. Although the Clippers also added Harry Giles, so maybe
Yep.
you'll have a little bit of a training camp battle there.
And
Uh,
I think we both thought Hartenstein might have been the potential guy who might have made some sense for the Lakers
yep, we did.
behind Jordan and Howard. Just a little bit of a different look there, but I can get why the Lakers were jumping at the opportunity there. But wasn't going to be a massive difference maker by any means.
Instead, the Lakers are bringing in Kenneth Faried for a workout because they're putting together the 2013 All-Star team for
He
whatever
played
reason.
summer league, right? I
He
think for
did. He played
Portland
summer
this
league with
year.
Portland. I got to go check
How
out
did
a
he
game when he was
do?
playing. Not great. Not great. I can say that. He
I mean, how
honestly,
old?
I
He's got to be what,
he's
31 or 30,
32 in a
30?
few weeks, I believe, because I was
Okay,
just looking at this for
32 at the
Lakers
start of
Nation.
the season, opening night
Yeah.
actually.
So
Hold on, I got to look up the summer league stats on Kenneth Faried right now.
I can
Guys,
just
if
say,
just shout out to former employer of mine, Real GM. If you're ever looking, put the player's name in the search bar. All of their stats, summer leagues, everything else. I also think it's the only place I know of where you can find stats from the play-in tournament as well,
oh,
called out separately as their own. Yeah, 3 games, 5 rebounds, five. No, oh, sorry, that's points. So 5 points, 7 points, and 8.3 rebounds, 1.3 blocks. Maybe,
I mean,
maybe. I loved Kenneth Faried back
I
in the
did too.
day.
I
I
could say
just,
that my expectations may have been too high, but the game I watched, I
yeah.
made sure that I was up close for that one. I really wanted to keep an eye on him and see what he had, and he just didn't really stand out. Not like you would expect the guy who's been in the NBA, who's been on Team USA, to stand out against summer league guys. I can say that. Like he didn't look out of place on a summer
Did
league
not
team, which was
have one of those
surprising.
monster seasons in China
No.
2 years ago either. 1920 played in China, and 17 points and 10 rebounds and 2.5 blocks a night, but shot under 50%. That's not good.
No.
Oh, over there. That's pretty bad. So yeah, I always root for guys. I always root for guys to make it and stick as long as they can. So maybe he makes his way back, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
Never know. Damian Dotson waived by the Cavs, and the
Cavs, yeah.
Cavs they signed Denzel Valentine as well.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a change on the wing there, going with a little bit more of a true wing versus a guard. Dotson
Hmm.
was a much more of a guard player. Had a nice year for a pretty bad Cavs team. He can still score the ball, but that's about all he does. He had a non-guaranteed contract, and Denzel Valentine coming in on sounds like a partially guaranteed 2-year deal. Valentine. his situation is interesting because he looked really good his sophomore season with the
Right.
Bulls,
Yeah.
and then he had that ankle surgery that kept him out the entirety of his third year, and then he never really looked the same. Now, this is where my I don't know why I have it. Michigan State bias that I believe they'll all be good in the NBA comes in, but I still think there could be something there. And let's face it, it's not like the wing rotation in Cleveland is anything that he's got to exactly fight his way onto the roster to get playing time with. It's Isaac Okoro and not a whole heck of a lot else. So I'll keep an eye on Denzel Valentine. I bet he plays some minutes for this Cavs team.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right, some of the strangest. Let's start off with Mike James. Looks like he's been released in Russia, but I mean, for everything we've heard, he's played really well there, but it seemed like personality-wise wasn't a great fit. And he was actually linked to the Lakers recently as a guy they might have turned to before they signed Rajon Rondo. Did spend some time with the Nets and had a fairly good showing. What's going on? This is a guy that really seemed like he was poised to just continue tearing it up in Europe, and now he's been released.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a weird situation. Mike James is a guy who he came out of school, so he's older. He's third. We were just talking about Kenneth Faried. He's already 31. He turned 31 about a month ago, but has only been in the NBA a couple different times. He did a.
That's why
a
the
stint
Lakers
in the
were
league.
interested in him because he was over 30.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Look at you said it, not me. That was Trevor, everybody,
That's
not
right.
Keith. Let's make sure we get that correct. But yeah, he was in the league in 2017-18 with the Suns and then the Pelicans. And then he came back over last year with the Nets, if you remember, towards the end of the season. Remember, the Nets had all those injuries, especially the ball handlers, and they needed a point guard. And what they did with Cheska Moscow, which was where he had been playing, their season was over. And it sounds like they almost did as close as what you'll ever see to a FIFA type of loan deal, where Cheska said, yeah, if you want to go play for the Nets, that's fine. Go play for the Nets. And so that's clearly what he did, was he came over and played for the Nets. And that's how he finished out last season. Now, from the NBA standpoint, because people have asked about this, is how does that work if he was under another contract? From the NBA standpoint, he's a free agent. All the NBA cares is that he gets a clearance letter from FIBA saying that they're okay to sign him. And clearly that happened. There was a clearance letter given, and they signed him because from the NBA, like you said, they don't care that he's got this contract. He's an NBA free agent. They just need FIBA to say, you're not violating anything that's going to cause a big mess, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So, but last year in Russia, 17 points per game, 5 assists per game. If you watch the video where we talked about Kevin Pangos, anytime a guy's up over 5 assists per game in Europe, that's pretty
Really
good because it's hard to get assists in Europe. You have to basically your pass rather has to directly lead to a shot. It can't be pass it to him, a bunch of moves and dribbles and take a 40-foot step back, and you still get the assist. Like it doesn't work.
That counts. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. So he really good player over there. But what I had heard was he wants to be in the NBA, he wants to be in the States, and he actually played pretty good for the Nets last year. So my guess is he's going to catch on with somebody for training camp, or he may say, all right, you know what, I'll go to the G League this year. That's actually going to happen. I'll go there and kind of play my way through the G League if I have to. Is one thing that he hasn't done real well in the NBA is shoot. He's only at about 38% overall in that time, but it's still fairly small sample size. It's only about 49 total games. So we'll see. But I do think this is probably a case of he wants to be an NBA player. And Cheska probably looked at it and said, all right, if you don't want to be here anyway, let us just move on. We'll let you out of your contract and off we go. And that's, now we'll see where he lands.
Speaking of international contracts, Marc Gasol, after getting traded by the Lakers to the Memphis Grizzlies and then negotiating a buyout there, will play in Spain for Girona. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but Girona is the team.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversation about this. So
we did.
Spanish listener or someone who knows, tell us in the comments the correct like way to pronounce them. We will
Pronunciation.
give credit to that later because we do not know. But Marc Gasol owns the team, so his
That's
team that
convenient.
or he's at least a part owner of. But good for him. They're a second division team in Spain, and that had been the thought was he wanted to finish his career over in Spain playing. So yeah, it was funny. I saw a couple people saying it's too bad the Grizzlies didn't have like a legitimate spot
Yeah.
for him and
Hmm.
let him finish it out there. Which yeah, that would have been pretty good too. But
I mean,
hey, he seems to be
technically,
happy in Spain, and
he does finish his career as a Grizzly, technically,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
even if he doesn't actually
sure,
suit up for them, but still.
yeah,
Um,
yep,
let's do. Oh, this is so strange. The Charles Bassey situation. Before we get into
yeah,
the rule changes for this year, and we've got a couple things to get into
yep.
there, but the Charles Bassey situation, still not signed. Still not signed by the Philadelphia 76ers. It seems like we're essentially seeing a holdout here, aren't we?
Yeah, a little bit. So what happened is if we go back to the draft, the Sixers paid $2 million to buy the pick that Bassey got drafted with.
Hmm.
Now, that was the 53rd overall pick. And once you're past about the 45th picks midway through the second round, you're starting to look at a lot of guys who are going to get two-way contracts.
Yeah.
It's a lot of guys who are getting drafted and they're going to sign a two-way. In Bassey's case, he's not doing a two-way, and he doesn't want to do a standard camp deal where he gets only one guaranteed year. So what he is holding out for is he wants two guaranteed seasons. Now,
Yeah.
this kid's had a kind of a winding road to this point in his career. He was a highly touted prospect coming out of high school. He went to Western Kentucky. Gosh, I can't think of the coach's name now. I apologize, but I know he's a big time college coach who's landed at Western Kentucky, and he is one of the guys who started really recruiting people like crazy. So that was kind of where it was like, wow, this kid went there, and there were Rick Stansberry, that's who it is. There were some questions about his eligibility and these kind of things. I've had people tell me, be careful, we don't know how this kid's head is in the right place and all that stuff. But as a junior, last year, 17.6 points, 11.6 rebounds, 3 blocks per night. So he can play. He's
Hmm.
not a guy who can't play at all. Did not play summer league though because of this whole contract
They thought he was
issue
going to
with.
play.
Yep, they thought he'd be there, and
Uh,
as far as I know, he was there with the team in Vegas and was ready at any point to play. So how this works with a second round pick, just a little education for people here is, in order to retain the draft rights on a player, the teams need to give them what's called a minimum tender. And what the minimum tender is, it's a 1 year non-guaranteed minimum contract. So even when you look at some of the kind of funny draft rights players, like guys who
hmm.
were drafted back in the mid 80s that are now way older than me, like, and they're still draft rights guys, it's because teams just keep giving them the required minimum tender, and that's how you retain the draft rights is every
Hmm.
year. And of course, people are like, well, why don't these guys just sign them? Well, because then the team's going to immediately turn around and waive them. But in the
Right.
case of Bassey, they paid $2 million for the pick. So they don't want to just turn right around and waive the kid. They want to have him be a part of the organization. Let's go back to JP Tokido, KJ McDaniels. They
Hmm.
both did this. And what they did was they forced it and signed the 1 year minimum tender. In KJ McDaniels' case, it worked out okay. He ended up making it in the league for a few years. JP Tokido was waived and never played. I still believe to this day has never played an actual NBA game. He's only played in summer league entries. So this one's tough because Bassey has no real leverage here, but Philly doesn't have a whole lot of leverage either.
Right.
And if they really do believe this is a good player, and I think 6'11" center who can move a little bit and do some stuff. Has he extended his range a little bit each year? That gets hard because you may see this guy show up somewhere else if Philly has to just waive him and those kind of things. My guess is ultimately this gets done and Philly looks at it and says, all right, can we dip a little bit deeper into our non-taxpayer mid-level without tripping the hard cap and those kind of things? Can we pull this off?
Hmm.
Because they're still sitting on, they actually have an open standard roster spot which seems like it's probably held for Bassey because Aaron Henry and Grant Riller are their two-way players. So it's going to be something to just keep an eye on. It's by no means the biggest drama going on in Philly to watch over the
No.
next couple weeks, but it's definitely something to still keep an eye on, especially if you're a Sixers fan.
Well, in the second round too, that's where, a lot of people think, oh, a player just wants to be drafted. Not necessarily. There's some players who will say, I'd prefer to not be drafted than get
Sure.
drafted late in the second round because then I can choose my landing spot and find the right.
Yeah.
It happened with Joel Ayayi, who wound up with the
Yeah.
Lakers with their summer league squad. He
Yep.
had some opportunities to get drafted and said, no, thank you, please don't draft me. And
Yep.
then wound up signing on and got a two-way contract with the Lakers. So the second round,
Yep.
it gets a bit tricky, and a lot of time maybe we don't pay enough attention to it because the big names aren't quite there. But this situation with Bassey is interesting, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out because this could set some precedent here for how this will work moving forward, and if players will
Yeah.
try to use a little bit of leverage in the future as well.
Yeah, and just to give a little example of what this year's second round looked like, Nehemias Queta, 39th pick by the Kings, he's on a two-way this year. Joe Wieskamp, the 41st pick's on a two-way. Kessler Edwards of the Nets is on a two-way. Juan Begarin, who the Celtics drafted, he's not even going to come over. He's going to play overseas this year. Delano Banton is going to be on a two-way. No, I'm sorry. He signed up standard contract. David Johnson, the Raptors' second round pick, he's going to be on a two-way. Sharif Cooper's on a two-way. Marcus
That's right.
Zagorowski with the Nets, he's probably going right into Long Island. And then this is where it gets a little, I think, more interesting for Bassey is Philip Petrasev, who people may know because he was Gonzaga's starting center a couple years ago and was a pretty good player for them, then played overseas for a year and then got drafted. He's staying overseas. So I think if I'm Bassey, he's probably looking at it and saying, all right, so this guy's probably coming in the next year or two anyway. I want to be established, get some money because I don't want to be
Yeah.
just bounced out the minute they want to bring him over. Then Brandon Boston, he got a big contract from the Clippers, a lot of more guaranteed money than any player picked in the 50s has ever gotten. But he was a guy who slipped for other reasons. We'll just leave it at that. Then every other player drafted around Bassey, so Luka Garza, Sandro Mamukelashvili. Yes, I said that
That
correctly.
was pretty good.
I mostly did that one because you like that one. Aaron Wiggins, Scotty Lewis, Jericho Sims, those guys all signed two-way contracts, or a couple other guys, Bosa Koprivica and Raquan Gray, they haven't even signed at all, and they're probably either playing in the G League this year or they're
Mhm.
playing overseas. So he's it's going to be hard for him to get that 2 years of guaranteed money at this point. And if I'm Philly, I'm going to let this play out for another couple weeks and then say, all right, kid, we got to solve this one because where are we going? They still have about 2.6 million. It's actually 2.59 million of their taxpayer mid-level exception left that they could give him. They're
Mhm.
already hard. They're already over. So that I'm butchering this. They're already in a position where it won't matter if they go because they're using the taxpayer mid level anyway. So even if they become hard capped, it won't. They can't become hard capped because they're already over it. So
Right.
I completely blew that whole transition there, but they could sign the kid if they want to without triggering any hard cap issues. I should have just said that to
That,
begin with.
that's the bottom line. That's the important part. They
Yeah.
can sign him if they
Yep.
want to. So we'll see
Give him the
how
extra
this
year
all
or two.
plays out. Yeah, if
Yep.
if he's able
Yeah,
to
my
get that
guess
out
is
of it.
that's what he gets. Is he gets a guaranteed year this year, where they say, all right, we'll guarantee you this year. We'll do an early guarantee date second year. Third year will be one of those team options with a non-guarantee, and then we'll go from there.
That's what happens when you spend money on a second round pick. That second rounder then has the leverage of knowing, hey, they already invested
Yep,
$2 million in me, so
that's
maybe I
it.
can use
Yeah.
that to get a little bit
And let's
more.
face it, they could use a little more depth behind Embiid. It's just really Andre Drummond right now. They don't have another big. So
Yeah.
I'm sure this kid's looking and saying, hey, man, I could, maybe actually play a role here. Now, what would probably really happen is if Embiid or Drummond got hurt, they'd go sign somebody off the street and say, all right,
Hmm.
you're coming in instead or make a trade. But yeah, it's we're all going to be watching Ben Simmons, of course, but I'll be keeping an eye on this one all the way through as well until camp starts, because you're going to want to have that solved well in advance of that.
Yeah, right.
Probably within the next week, because about a week or so from now is when everybody will start really filtering back into town, and they'll be doing a lot of unofficial workouts and a lot of playing some pickup and those kind of things. So you want to have this solved and done before then.
So resolution coming on that front, probably sooner rather than later for Charles Bassey. We also have some changes here. Well, one change anyway, at least for sure, and that's the out of bounds rule, where it used to be that if a ball goes out of bounds in the last 2 minutes, it was getting reviewed, and that was taking forever. I'm thinking back to some games where there would be 30 seconds left in the game, and it would take 30 minutes to get through it, because every time the ball got deflected out of bounds, we were getting a review, and we're seeing multiple camera angles, and did it slide off of this player's finger or that player or whatever. Well, now that's changing. Instead, an out of bounds call can only be reviewed now with a coach's challenge in the final 2 minutes of the game, which should speed things up. Keith, I saw a lot of spirited discussion on both sides of this. I had some people saying, no, we don't want that. Just get the call right. If that means you have to review it, review it. And then I had other people say, yes, please, let's speed this thing up. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, it's really tough. So the game I think we all remember was game 2 of the Suns and Clippers in the West Finals. Final 90 seconds took 33 minutes to complete, and the last 9.2 seconds took 20 minutes. And I think that was the game that finished with the what are they calling it? The Valley-oop.
The Valley-oop, that's right.
And then that took a lot of kind of the shine off that, because it was like, oh, cool, it's over. Like, let's all go to bed.
Right.
So yeah, that can't be that can't happen. That's insane. That's the nonsense where people who don't like the NBA that always say like, yeah, it takes a half hour to play the last 2 minutes. You can't even argue with them because they did.
It did. Yeah.
So I lean towards, I have no issue with this until a call is wrong, is blatantly wrong,
right,
and the coach can't review it, right? Because notice they've already used their challenge. Maybe what I would like to see them do, if you're going to do this, is give the coaches one extra challenge that can only be used in the last 2 minutes on an out of bounds call. That way they're assured of having a way to get it right if it's blatantly wrong. The ones that get me is the ones where, right, you and I go for the same loose ball, we both hit it at roughly the same time.
Yeah.
You just got to go with the judgment call and run with it. It's it's gonna. I mean, we spend so much time on these ones where you'll watch 14 replays from different angles, and you still are like, I don't know. Then just end it. Just be like, all right, we're going with what we called on the floor, or just call a jump ball. Take it to center court and do a jump ball, and live it that way. I mean, it's not a great solution, but
do we do in pickup games?
Shoot for it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, well then everybody would make sure they have a Curry or Korver on the court at all times. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing them give them the extra challenge that can only be used in that specific situation, just to make sure, if it's like, oh man, dribbled it off the guy's foot and it went out of bounds and they called it the wrong way, because what's going to happen first time it changes the result of a game, or somebody doesn't get a last shot, or somebody does get a last shot that shouldn't. Everybody's going to lose their ever-loving minds, and we're never going to hear the end of it.
That's definitely going to happen. But like you said, the games were taking so long, it wasn't as exciting. I do think with your solution, though, with adding that extra challenge, I think coaches are going to use that as an extra timeout, right? Like, even if it's not close, they're going to challenge anyway and just use that as a timeout. But I mean, there's other ways around it that you could do that. Other things that you could do. I would like to see the coaches challenge in general change, so that if a team gets it right, if the challenge is successful, they get the challenge back, so that you don't just burn it and then it's gone. So I'd like to see that. But in this situation, I think the biggest positive, and we saw this start to happen towards the end of last season. I'm trying to remember, there was a specific play where this happened, and it was pretty egregious, and it resulted. So the defender, a player's dribbling or has the ball in their hands, and the defender pokes the ball loose. Well, if you've got a grip on the basketball, naturally, if somebody knocks it out of your hands, the end of your fingertip is probably going to be the last to touch the ball,
Yeah,
even though you're not the one who caused it. And then when you review that and you're going frame by frame, well, yeah, you're going to see that guy touch the ball last. When historically that's always gone to the team that had possession of the ball. And so I'd like to see that get back to more of a normal call where
agreed.
the team who knocked the ball
Yep.
out does not get possession of the ball there.
100%. Yeah, because I think it's one thing, yeah, if it's knocked out of your hands and you reach for it and you tip
Yes.
it and knock it out, that's different. But yeah, because if that happens 2 minutes into the game, it's just going to be ruled
Right.
off the defense and back to the offense, and we all just go and no one argues it and
No.
doesn't jump up and down and scream and yell. It's yeah, it's whatever they can do to complete this because nobody wants this. It's not. It's that's when I start tweeting about oh cool ref show like this is what we all tuned in to watch. So yeah, that's yeah no yeah get it whatever quickens it up and let's go. And if people yell and scream, people yell and scream. It happens.
And lastly, we've got the in-season tournament could be happening
Yeah,
with $1 million prize per player being on the line. Now, it was a little bit fuzzy to me. I'm assuming we're talking about not this season, but the following season
yeah, definitely
for
not
that
this
tournament because the
season.
schedule has already been
Yeah.
built and all that. It's not built into it. So we'll be talking about
Yeah, and that's a
two
good
seasons
point
from
on the
now.
schedule. No split schedule this year. We have the
Right.
whole thing this year. We because there's not the need to split it because of COVID
Mm-hmm.
cancellations and all the other things. And knock on wood, there isn't a need to split it.
Right.
But yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, it's the schedule's done. So this is not for this year. Sounds like next year at the earliest. Maybe not even next year. We'll see.
So we've seen how much fun the play-in game can be. Again, I've got a lot of
Mhm.
people though who don't like a lot of players who don't like it, right? Which is understandable. I get it. There's two sides to the argument though. I think that the Lakers and the Warriors playing in an amazing game that was a lot of fun and came down to the very
Sure.
end, like that pretty much cemented that okay, hey, this is not going away. But still, you just kind of had that thrilling moment, right? You had another like there's a lot on the line for this one particular game. And so the NBA is trying to create that, not like a kind of a mini March Madness or something with this tournament. And the challenge has always been how do we get the players to buy in? How do we make this something that is meaningful so that we don't have to just have the star players say mid-season tournament, cool, I'll see you guys in a week. I'm gonna go down to Cabo. Right? So
Yeah.
they are hoping that by putting $1 million on the line, that's going to get everybody involved and everybody invested and put some legitimacy behind it. I'm not sure how it's all going to play out. It'll be interesting to see exactly how it's going to work, but it sounds like it is a thing that is going to happen in the NBA.
Yeah, and people are going to instantly go to what does $40 million superstar X care?
Right.
Part of what they care about is getting that million for the guy on the roster
Exactly.
who's making less than a million a season. They did. I know that sounds crazy, but they do care about that stuff. There's a lot of veterans out there who want to take care of guys. Yes, there's going to be some $40 million veteran who's going to be like, I don't care about this thing. Get me out of this as quick as we can, and
Hmm.
give me a few extra days off, and I'm good. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Well, one thing I'm going to be keeping an eye on here is part of why Disney wanted the bubble was Disney wanted to prove, hey, we can do this if you want a place to have something like this. Now,
Hmm.
their gyms aren't big enough to support massive crowds, and that's probably going to be maybe the biggest reason for this. But if they looked at it and said, hey, who's going to really be traveling to watch the Kings and Trailblazers play anyway, no matter where this thing takes place, if it's not in home arenas, why not put it in a smaller place? And then, of course, we have where the Magic play, the Amway Center, where you full size NBA arena where you
Hmm.
could stage this. And one of the big selling points was it's not exactly hard to convince a bunch of people we're in half the league in the middle of January, February, when this would probably happen. It's freezing cold to say, hey, you want to go spend a week in Florida? Like, that's not very hard to sell,
Right.
right? That's pretty easy, and you could even sell it to them like bring your family, and they can do your Disney and stuff while you're kind of playing in this tournament. So I'm going to be curious to see if Disney is somehow involved in this because that was part of their whole thing of hey, with the bubble. The biggest reason was let's get this season finished, get our TV money. Let's do that, and let's kind of come in here like heroes. But let's do let's we've shown you now we can do this kind of thing, and shut this down. So I'll be interested to see if that has something in play here down the line as this comes to fruition. But Adam Silver's been saying this since before he was the actual commissioner, that he likes the soccer model of these other trophies, and it is kind of cool. I mean, it's fun to watch. If anybody watches Premier League, it is fun to watch these tournaments. I'd like to see them. It would be really fun if they eventually opened this up and like the G League teams are somehow involved, because it would be fun to have that. Sioux Falls Skyforce is, maybe going to take out an NBA team in a tournament like you have over in England in the different cups.
The FA Cup.
It's pretty rare that you get that, but yeah, but it would be fun. I mean, that Tottenham game last year, they played like that 8th division team. That's none of the guys are even they're all semi-pro players on the team. Like their goal to put them in the game against Tottenham was scored by a PE teacher assisted by a garbage truck driver. Like that's awesome. Like those stories are amazing. Like I'll take that. So and maybe that's you and I's chance to actually play in a meaningful game. So I'll take that part of it too.
I would volunteer. I would still probably be on the bench, but that's okay. I would volunteer to
I
take
could make
place
it
in
up and
something
down
like
the
that.
court once.
Yes.
One time.
You
better believe if I get it, it's going up. It might get blocked
shooting
right back into my face, but I'm shooting it. If I ever got into a real game against an NBA player, it's going. There's a shot is going up. It might be ugly and it might not make it very far, but I'm hoisting one.
Just because someday you may have that story of I actually scored on an NBA player,
and
right?
then
Just
I'll
on
be
the
in
random chance that
reference.
goes in. That's
right.
right.
I pull it up and point it. Look, 0 for 1, 10 seconds played. And then I would go on the bench and wave a towel better than anybody's ever done it.
Oh, I can only imagine the nicknames that would come up there on Basketball Reference, which has some hilarious nicknames, by the way. Some ones that I've never even heard. I go on there and I'm like,
yeah,
that's really a nickname for that guy.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, they're more often than not. I'm like, what is this? Like, who calls this guy this? I've never even heard this before. So yeah, I'm with you.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens with this midseason tournament. It sounds like it is going to take place. Interesting concept, and we'll see if the players buy in to this addition that's going to be coming next season. All right, I think that about wraps things up for today. Everybody, make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. If you listen to the podcast version of this, make sure you follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and if you could like this video, we would certainly appreciate it. Till next time, everybody. See ya, and stay safe.